The suitcase sat by the door like it had been dropped there by mistake. Scuffed leather with a peeling sticker from some desert festival in Nevada. E. Wade was scrawled across it in black marker. The kind of handwriting that looked like it was done in a rush. It was Saturday morning, and I was elbow-deep in chicken stock, the kitchen thick with the smell of thyme and onions. I was prepping for Nick's big dinner with his work buddies. Some university types who talked about impact metrics like they were saving the world. The pot was simmering, and I was stirring, trying not to burn this thing, when I noticed the suitcase from the corner of my eye. My first thought, wrong address. Delivery guy screwed up. Nick was in the living room, pacing, practicing his toast. To success, he said, his voice booming like he was auditioning for a TED Talk. To stability. I could picture him adjusting his glasses, smoothing his button down. Stability. The word felt like a brick in my chest. I stood there, wooden spoon in hand, staring at the suitcase, and it hit me like a slow-moving train. I didn't know who I was in this house. Nick's wife? The cook? The woman who kept the fridge stocked and the floors clean? I wasn't sure anymore. The doorbell didn't ring. Instead, there was a knock, sharp, like someone who didn't care if they were interrupting. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, glanced at the bubbling pot, and opened the door. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with a scruffy jaw and eyes that didn't quite meet mine. His jacket smelled like someone else's cigarettes, stale and clinging. "Hey," he said, voice low like he was testing the air. "Hope this is cool. My dad said you guys had a spare room." He stepped past me, dragging the suitcase inside, not waiting for an answer. I stood frozen, the door still open, cool air slipping in. Dad. Nick's dad? My brain scrambled to connect the dots, but Nick hadn't said a word about anyone coming. Not a text, not a heads up. The guy, E. Wade, I guessed, moved like he already knew the layout, dropping his bag by the stairs and glancing at the kitchen. "Smells good," he said, and there was this half smile, like he was trying to be polite but didn't have the energy. I shut the door, my pulse ticking faster than it should have. "You're staying?" I asked, sounding dumber than I meant to. He turned, finally looking at me, and his eyes were this deep gray, like a storm cloud you couldn't stop watching. "Yeah, just for a bit. I'm Aiden, by the way." He stuck out a hand, then pulled it back, like he'd remembered handshakes were awkward. "Nick didn't tell you?" "No," I said, sharper than I intended. The broth hissed behind me, threatening to boil over. I rushed to the stove, turning down the heat, feeling Aiden's presence like a shadow in the room. Nick's voice carried from the living room, still droning on about shared visions. I wanted to scream, "Who the hell is this guy, Nick?" But I didn't. I stirred the pot, my knuckles white around the spoon. Aiden leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me like he was trying to figure out if I was pissed or just confused. "I can crash somewhere else if it's a problem," he said, but it didn't sound like he meant it. More like he was giving me an out I wouldn't take. "It's fine." I lied because what else could I say? He nodded, grabbed his suitcase, and headed upstairs, his boots thudding on the steps. I stood there, the kitchen suddenly too quiet, the air too heavy. Something had shifted, like a crack in the foundation you don't notice until the whole house tilts. I didn't know if it was Aiden showing up, or Nick not telling me, or the way I'd stopped recognizing myself in this life. But as I stirred the broth, I felt it. Something was starting. Or maybe something was already falling apart. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of water running. Not the usual drip of the kitchen faucet Nick swore he'd fix, but a steady hiss from the upstairs bathroom. Aiden. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the weight of his arrival settling like dust I couldn't shake off. Nick was already gone. Left a note on the fridge about an early meeting. No mention of Aiden. No explanation. Just back by 6. "Love you." I crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. I shuffled to the kitchen, started the coffee maker, and tried to focus on the day. Dinner prep was done, but I had a freelance design deadline looming, and my laptop was buried under a pile of Nick's academic journals. The house felt off, like someone had rearranged the furniture while I was sleeping. Then I heard it. Soft guitar strums, muffled, coming from upstairs. Aiden, playing through headphones, the kind of sound that felt private, like I was eavesdropping on a secret. At dinner, Nick acted like nothing was new. He set an extra plate, poured wine, and said, casual as hell, "Aiden's staying a couple weeks." His place in LA went up in flames. He didn't elaborate. Didn't say if it was a literal fire or some metaphor for Aiden's life imploding. I nodded, slicing into my chicken, my jaw tight. Across the table, Aiden barely looked up, just pushed his food around, his fork scraping the plate. I wanted to ask, what burned? Your apartment? Your girlfriend? Your whole existence? But I didn't. Not with Nick there, steering the conversation to his latest research grant. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, except for the shower running again. Long, like Aiden was trying to wash something off that wouldn't budge. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Nick, and padded to the kitchen for water. The living room was dark, but I saw him through the crack in the guest room door, sitting on the floor, guitar in his lap, headphones on. His fingers moved slow, deliberate, like he was working through something heavier than a song. I stood there longer than I should have, watching the way his shoulders hunched, like he was carrying a weight he couldn't put down. He wasn't just crashing here. He was running from something. The next day, I was at the washing machine, sorting laundry, when Aiden appeared, hair damp, wearing nothing but a towel slung low on his hips. I froze, clutching a pair of Nick's khakis. He nodded at the pile in my hands. His clothes, mixed in with ours. Didn't mean to add to your load, he said, voice rough, like he hadn't slept either. I pulled out a black t-shirt, the collar ripped, still damp with sweat or something worse. This yours? I asked, holding it up. What's the story? Tears of your exes soaked into it. He laughed, a low sharp sound that caught me off guard. Nah, that's all me. Got into it with a door frame last night. He rubbed the back of his neck, and I noticed a bruise blooming under his jaw, faint but fresh. I didn't ask. Didn't want to know. But the air between us felt charged, like static before a storm. I tossed the shirt in the dryer. You're trouble, aren't you? I said, half joking, half testing. He leaned against the wall, towel slipping just enough to make me look away. Depends who's asking, he said, and that half smile was back, the one that felt like a dare. I turned to the machine, cranking the dial harder than necessary, my pulse loud in my ears. I didn't know what he was running from, but I could feel it. This wasn't a pit stop. Aiden was a fault line, and I was standing too close to the edge. The night started to blur. Aiden had this habit of cooking at ungodly hours. 2, 3 a.m., the kitchen lit only by the stove's glow. I'd wake to the sizzle of eggs, the sharp tang of kimchi cutting through the stillness. He'd be there, barefoot, in a faded tank top, stirring a pan with one hand, phone blasting Massive Attack through earbuds. I'd shuffle in for water, pretending I wasn't curious, but we'd end up talking. Small stuff at first, best deli sandwiches, he swore by pastrami on rye. Worst road trips, his involved a flat tire and a raccoon. Then it got deeper. Ever get scared sleeping next to someone? He asked one night, cracking an egg with one hand. Like, what if they see you dreaming? I leaned against the counter, glass cold in my palm. Yeah. Like they'll know too much. I didn't say Nick slept like a log, oblivious to my nightmares. Aiden just nodded, like he got it. He told me about his ex, the one who called him too much, because he'd stay up till dawn writing songs or drive across state lines for a burger. I told him about mine, not Nick, but the guy before, who said I was distant, because I'd rather sketch than talk about feelings. Aiden laughed. Soft. People throw that, too much, when they're scared of real. His eyes held mine a second too long, and I looked away, sipping water I didn't want. One afternoon, I was in my studio, a corner of the garage with my laptop and sketch pads, hunting for a client's invoice. Aiden wandered in, uninvited, his boots leaving faint dirt marks on the concrete. He picked up a sketch from my desk, a rough charcoal of a man's silhouette, head turned, neck shadowed. It wasn't him, not exactly, but the slope of the shoulders, the way the hair curled at the nape. It could have been. You draw? He asked, voice curious, not mocking. I snatched the paper back, my face hot. Just doodles. Client work keeps me busy. I stuffed the sketch in a drawer, slamming it shut. He didn't push, just tilted his head, studying me like I was a painting he didn't quite get. Looks like more than doodles. That guy. He's got a story. It's not you, I said, too quick, my voice sharp. He smirked, leaning against the wall. Never said it was. But, it could be. His tone was light, But his eyes weren't. They were steady, like he saw something I wasn't ready to show. I turned back to my laptop, clicking random files to look busy. You always barge into people's spaces? Only when they leave the door open, he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. He left after that, but the air felt different, like he'd stirred something up and left it swirling. I sat there, staring at the blank screen, my fingers itching to draw again. Not a client logo but him. The way he stood, all sharp edges and quiet chaos. I didn't. But the urge burned, and that scared me more than the late-night talks or the way his voice lingered in my head. Back in the kitchen that night, I found a post-it on the fridge, his handwriting. Dreams are just fires you don't burn in. Yet. I crumpled it, tossed it, but the words stuck. Aiden wasn't just passing through. He was leaving marks, and I was letting him. The power went out on a Tuesday night. The whole block plunged into dark after some substation blew. Nick was at the university, crashing in his office for stable Wi-Fi to prep his lectures. I was alone with Aiden. The house eerily quiet except for the faint hum of a neighbor's generator. I lit candles. Cheap ones from the dollar store, their wicks spitting as they burned. Aiden emerged from the guest room, holding a 6-pack of IPA from the fridge. Guess we're off the grid, he said, cracking one open and offering me another. The cold can felt like a lifeline. We sat on the living room floor, candles flickering on the coffee table, shadows dancing across the walls. The drink was bitter, but it loosened something in me. Aiden pulled out a deck of cards from his backpack, dog-eared and worn. Truth or dare, he said, smirking like he knew I'd pick truth to play it safe. I didn't. Dare, I said, surprising myself. He raised an eyebrow, then told me to sing the worst song I knew. I belted out a Go Doffel pop tune from high school, off-key and laughing, and he clapped like I'd won a Grammy. His turn. He picked truth. I leaned forward, the candlelight catching the stubble on his jaw. Ever lived with someone you didn't love, just 'cause it was easier than leaving? My voice was steady, but my chest tightened, like I'd ask myself instead. He took a long pull from his drink, eyes on the flame. Yeah, in LA. She was safe. Like a routine you don't question till it's gone. He looked at me then, and I felt exposed, like he'd seen the parts of my life I didn't say out loud. I didn't answer, just grabbed the cards and dealt another round to break the silence. Dare, I said again, reckless now. He leaned closer, the air between us warm. Show me something you've never shown anyone. My heart thudded. I thought he'd laugh it off, but he paused, then tugged his shirt over his head. In the dim light, I saw it, a jagged tattoo of a snake on his collarbone, the lines uneven, like it was done in a basement. Got it when I was 19, he said. Drunk. Worst decision I ever made. I reached out, almost touching it, then stopped. It's not that bad, I said, my voice softer than I meant. Kinda suits you. His eyes locked on mine, and I didn't look away this time. The room felt smaller, the candles burning lower, the space between us shrinking with every breath. We kept playing, but the game wasn't about cards anymore. Truths got sharper, him admitting he dreams of fires that don't touch him. Me confessing I stay up sketching to avoid thinking. Dares got bolder, him balancing a spoon on his nose, me dancing to no music, both of us laughing until my sides hurt. But that question he'd answered, about living with someone out of convenience, hung in the air like smoke. I didn't say it, but I felt it. I was living it. With Nick. With this house. With a life I'd stopped choosing. The power didn't come back that night. We fell asleep on the couch, drinks empty, cards scattered. I woke up with his jacket over me, his breathing slow beside me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. But I also felt it, the drift, pulling me away from Nick, from the life I'd built. And Aiden, with his snake tattoo and his quiet truths, was the current I couldn't fight. Sunday morning, Nick and I piled into his Prius for a brunch at his buddy Greg's place in the suburbs. It was one of those crisp fall days, leaves crunching underfoot, air smelling like wood smoke. I wore my good jeans and a sweater that didn't scream, I'm trying too hard. Nick was chatty, rattling on about Greg's new promotion, but I was only half listening, my mind stuck on Aiden. His snake tattoo, the way his voice dropped when he talked about dreams. I hadn't told Nick about the power outage night, the drinks, the truths. It felt like a secret I wasn't ready to share, or maybe one I didn't want to admit I was keeping. Greg's house was all glass and sharp angles, the kind of place that felt more like a showroom than a home. His wife, Lena, greeted us with air kisses and a tray of mimosas. Then I saw her, Nick's ex, Claire, perched on a bar stool in a dress so short it was practically a suggestion. Her nails matched her lipstick, a bold red that screamed confidence. Nick hugged her, lingering a beat too long, and introduced her as a memory from my wild youth. Everyone laughed, but my smile felt like it was stapled on. Claire's eyes flicked to me, sizing me up, and I suddenly wished I'd worn something sharper than a sweater. The brunch dragged. Claire dominated the conversation, tossing her hair, telling stories about her and Nick's college days, road trips, dive bars, a tattoo she dared him to get, he didn't. Nick grinned, nostalgic, and I sipped drink, nodding like I cared. Lena kept refilling my glass, whispering, "She's a lot, isn't she?" I laughed, but it felt hollow. By the time we cut into the quiche, I was buzzing. Not just from the booze but from the way Nick's hand brushed Claire's when he passed the salt. It was nothing probably, but it felt like something. In the car on the way home, I stared out the window, the suburbs blurring into streaks of green and brown. Nick hummed along to the radio. Oblivious. "You okay?" he finally asked, glancing over. "Fine," I said, my voice clipped. I wanted to ask about Claire, about why he hadn't mentioned she'd be there, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I pulled out my phone and texted Aiden, my fingers moving before my brain caught up. "You ever hold back something that's eating you alive, or just let it out?" His reply came fast, like he'd been waiting. "Holding back's like swallowing fire. It burns either way, but letting it out means you're alive." I read it twice, my pulse quickening. Nick was still humming, and I felt like I was in two places at once. Here in this car with the man I'd married, and somewhere else with Aiden, where everything felt raw and electric. When we got home, Aiden was in the backyard, tossing a tennis ball for the neighbor's dog through the fence. He waved, casual, but his eyes lingered on me, like he could tell I was unraveling. I went inside, poured a glass of water, and stood at the sink, gripping the counter. Claire's laugh, Nick's hand, Aiden's text, they swirled in my head, a storm I couldn't outrun. I didn't know what I was holding back anymore, but it was heavy, and it was shifting the balance of everything I thought I knew about my life. It was a Wednesday evening, and the house was quiet except for the soft patter of rain against the windows. Nick was at a faculty mixer, probably sipping cheap wine and debating Nietzsche with his colleagues. I was in my room, sprawled on the bed, sketching absent-mindedly, random lines that kept turning into the curve of a jaw, a shadowed neck. I told myself it wasn't Aiden, but my pencil had other ideas. The cat, Miso, was missing, probably hiding from the storm. I called his name half-heartedly, more annoyed than worried. Aiden knocked on my open door, leaning against the frame, his hair damp from the rain. "Found your guy," he said, nodding toward Miso, who was curled in his arms, purring like a traitor. He was under my bed, plotting world domination. I laughed, setting my sketchpad aside. He's got big plans for a 10-pound furball. I stood, reaching for Miso, but Aiden stepped closer, passing him to me. Our hands brushed, and the air shifted, like the moment before a match strikes. We both froze, Miso squirming between us. Then Aiden leaned down, and we were under the bed together, laughing as Miso darted away, but the laughter died fast. His face was inches from mine, his breath warm, and before I could think, his lips were on mine. It wasn't some movie star kiss, all slow motion and perfect. It was quick, urgent, like we'd both been holding our breath for weeks and finally let go. My fingers grazed his arm, and I felt the tremor in them, like I'd touched something electric. He pulled back first, his eyes wide, like he'd surprised himself as much as me. "This is wrong," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. He was still close, his hand hovering near my wrist, not touching but not leaving either. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. My heart was hammering, and my brain was screaming to step back, to shut this down, but my body didn't move. Neither did his. He stayed there, under the bed with me, the rain louder now, like it was trying to drown out the guilt creeping in. Miso scampered across the room, oblivious, and Aiden let out a shaky laugh. "Your cat's a terrible wingman." I smiled, but it felt fragile, like it might crack if I pushed it too far. "Yeah, he's the worst." My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Aiden stood, offering me a hand to pull me up. I took it, and the contact sent another jolt through me, sharper than the kiss. He didn't leave the room right away. He sat on the edge of my bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. I didn't mean to. I mean, I shouldn't have. He stopped rubbing his face. You're married, Ellen. To my brother. I know, I said, and it came out harsher than I meant. I sat on the chair across from him, clutching my sketchpad like a shield. So why'd you do it? He looked up, and his eyes were raw, no smirk, no charm. Because I see you. And I don't think anyone else does. The words landed like a punch, stealing my breath. I wanted to argue, to say Nick saw me, that I was happy, but the lie wouldn't form. Aiden stood, his shadow long across the floor. I'll keep my distance, he said, but it sounded like a question. He walked out, and I sat there, the rain still falling, Miso now asleep on the pillow. The sketchpad was open, and there it was, the jaw, the neck, undeniably Aiden. I tore the page out, crumpled it, but didn't throw it away. It felt like proof of something I wasn't ready to name. The kiss changed everything, but we acted like it didn't. Days bled into a weird routine where Aiden and I danced around each other, careful not to brush too close, our conversations clipped to safe topics like coffee brands or the weather. Nick, oblivious, kept planning group outings, like he was trying to play happy family. That Friday, he dragged us to a bowling alley, all neon lights and sticky floors. Team bonding, he called it, grinning as he laced up his rented shoes. I bowled like this, my ball veering into the gutter every time, but Nick cheered anyway, his enthusiasm grating against my nerves. Aiden was quiet, sipping a flat soda, his eyes flicking to me when Nick wasn't looking. At one point, I grabbed a slice of pizza from the greasy tray we were sharing. Aiden reached for the same slice, our fingers grazing. He pulled back fast, holding up a finger like a silent, "Not now." My stomach twisted, not guilt, not exactly, but something sharper, like I was betraying myself. Nick was too busy high-fiving a strike to notice, rambling about his new course, Philosophy's Greatest Hits. I forced a smile, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying Aiden's lips, his words. I see you. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was scrolling my phone when a text from Aiden popped up, a photo of my bare feet on the stairs, snapped earlier when I didn't notice him behind me. The message read, "Your walk's like someone itching to bolt but pretending they're just grabbing milk." I stared at it, my chest tight. He wasn't wrong. I'd been tiptoeing through my life, faking it for Nick, for myself. I didn't reply, but I saved the photo, like it was evidence of something I couldn't name. The next day, Nick cooked breakfast. Pancakes, his one kitchen trick. He was in a good mood, humming as he flipped them, talking about a conference in Seattle. Aiden wandered in, hair messy, wearing a shirt with a hole near the collar. He grabbed a pancake, eating it plain, and Nick teased him about being a savage. It was so normal, so painfully domestic, that I wanted to scream. How could we sit here, the three of us, pretending? Me, hiding a kiss. Aiden, dodging my gaze. Nick, clueless, pouring syrup like the world wasn't tilting. Later, I caught Aiden in the hallway, carrying a laundry basket. You meant that, didn't you? I said, keeping my voice low. About my walk. He stopped, the basket balanced on his hip. Yeah. You move like you're one bad day from running. His eyes were steady, no smirk, just truth. I wanted to argue, to say I was fine, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I nodded and he brushed past, his arm grazing mine. It was an accident, but it felt deliberate, like a match struck in a room full of gas. By Sunday, the hypocrisy was suffocating. We went to a farmer's market, Nick's idea, all three of us weaving through stalls of overpriced kale and artisanal jam. Nick haggled over apples. Aiden bought a coffee and handed me the extra sugar packet without a word. I tucked it in my pocket. A tiny secret. Every glance, every brush of shoulders, was a lie we were both telling. And the worst part? I didn't want to stop. The thrill of it, the danger, was waking something in me I'd forgotten how to feel. Nick needed his car washed, so he tossed me the keys and asked Aiden and me to handle it. Teamwork makes the dream work, he said, half laughing, before heading to a department meeting. I didn't want to go, but Aiden was already grabbing his jacket, so I followed, the Prius keys heavy in my hand. The car wash was one of those automated ones, all soap suds and whirring brushes, the kind where you sit inside and let the machine do the work. I took the passenger seat. Aiden drove, and the silence between us was louder than the water pounding the windshield. I stared at the dashboard, the air thick with everything we weren't saying. The kiss. The late-night texts. The way my skin hummed when he was near. Finally, I couldn't take it. "We're not doing this," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the car wash. "Whatever this is, it stops now." Aiden's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles pale. "Okay," he said, eyes fixed on the brushes scrubbing the hood. His voice was flat, like he was agreeing to change a light bulb, not end something that hadn't even started. I turned to him, my heart pounding. "You serious?" He glanced at me, just for a second, and his eyes were storm gray, unreadable. "No. But you're not either." The words landed like a challenge, and I hated how right he was. I wanted to mean it, to draw a line and stay on my side of it, but my body betrayed me. My fingers twitching toward the gearshift, brushing his hand where it rested. The car wash roared around us, water sheeting down the windows, blurring the world outside. His hand didn't move, his pinky grazing mine, deliberate now. "Ellen," he said, low like a warning. "You say stop, I'll stop. But don't lie to yourself." I pulled my hand back, folding my arms tight across my chest. "I'm married. Aiden. To your brother. You think this is a game?" He laughed, sharp and bitter. "A game? Nah. Games have rules. This is just us being idiots." He shifted in his seat, facing me now, the car rocking slightly as the brushes hit the sides. "You're not happy. I see it every day. You're cooking his dinners, laughing at his jokes, but you're somewhere else. And I'm not saying I'm the answer, but I'm not pretending I don't feel it too." My throat burned. I wanted to scream that he was wrong, that I loved Nick, that this life was enough. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down, I knew he wasn't wrong. I was fading in this house, in this marriage, and Aiden was the first person to notice. The car wash cycle ended, the jets shutting off, leaving us in sudden quiet, water dripping down the glass. "I can't," I whispered more to myself than him. "I won't." He nodded, slow, like he was giving me permission to try. "Then don't." But his hand stayed on the gear shift, close enough to touch, and I didn't move away. That night, he knocked on my door. Nick was asleep, his snores faint through the wall. Aiden stood there, no words, just a question in his eyes. I stepped aside, letting him in. He closed the door, and we didn't stop. The line I'd drawn was gone, and I wasn't sure who'd erased it. Him, me, or the truth we couldn't outrun. It was a Tuesday, gray and damp, the kind of day that makes you feel like the world's pressing down. I was in the kitchen, chopping carrots for a stew, trying to focus on the rhythm of the knife. Nick was at the university, or so I thought, and Aiden was upstairs, packing for a trip he hadn't explained. Things between us had settled into a dangerous rhythm. Stolen moments, quiet nights, a secret we both carried like a bruise. I told myself I could handle it, that I was in control. I was wrong. The front door opened, and Nick walked in, earlier than expected, his coat dripping from the rain. He didn't say anything, just stood in the doorway, staring at me. My phone was on the counter, screen up, and I realized too late that it was unlocked. His face was blank, but his eyes were hard, like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. He crossed the room, picked up my phone, and set it down in front of me, deliberate, like he was placing evidence in a courtroom. I glanced at the screen. A text from Aiden, one I hadn't seen yet. "You smell like lightning before a storm." My stomach dropped, cold and heavy. I opened my mouth to explain, to lie, but Nick spoke first, his voice low, controlled. "You could have just left, Ellen. It would have hurt less. For all of us." I stood there, the knife still in my hand, carrots half chopped on the board. "Nick, I didn't know what to say." "I'm sorry? It's not what it looks like." Both were lies, and he knew it. The air felt like it was shrinking, squeezing the breath out of me. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that didn't suit him. "Long enough to feel like an idiot." He ran a hand through his hair, wet from the rain, and I saw the hurt in his eyes, raw and unguarded. "My brother. Ellen. My brother." He shook his head, like he was trying to wake up from a bad dream. "I trusted you. Both of you." I set the knife down, my hands shaking. "I didn't mean for this to happen," I said, and it was true, but it sounded pathetic, like a line from a bad movie. Nick didn't respond. He just turned and walked to the living room, leaving my phone on the counter, the text still glowing like a confession. Aiden came downstairs a few minutes later, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He stopped when he saw me, then glanced at Nick, who was sitting on the couch, staring at the blank TV. The silence was suffocating, thick with everything we weren't saying. Aiden's jaw tightened, and I knew he'd figured it out. "Nick," he started, but Nick held up a hand, cutting him off. "Don't," Nick said, his voice like gravel. "Just don't." Aiden looked at me, his eyes searching, but I couldn't meet them. I felt like I was drowning, and they were both watching me sink. Nick stood, grabbed his keys and walked out, the door slamming behind him. Aiden dropped his bag, took a step toward me, but I shook my head. "Don't," I echoed, my voice cracking. He stopped, nodded once, and picked up his bag again. "I'm sorry," he said, so quiet I almost missed it. Then he was gone too, the house empty except for me and the half-chopped carrots, the stew I'd never finish. Everything I'd built, everything I'd pretended to be, was burning, and I'd lit the match myself. Aiden was gone by Wednesday morning. His duffel bag, the one with the Nevada Festival sticker, wasn't by the stairs anymore. No note, no goodbye, just a text sent at 4 a.m. Got an interview in Arizona. Need to sort my head out. Take care, Ellen. I read it in bed, the screen's glow harsh against the dark, and felt a hollow ache, like someone had carved out a piece of me. Nick hadn't come home either. He'd texted late the night before, staying at Greg's for a bit. Need space. The house was mine now, but it didn't feel like home. It felt like a shell. I wandered to the kitchen, barefoot, the floor cold. Aiden's mug was still on the counter, the one with a hairline crack, stained from his ginger honey tea. I picked it up, ran my thumb over the chip, and almost threw it against the wall. Instead, I filled it with coffee, added a splash of drink, and sat at the table, staring at nothing. Miso jumped onto the chair beside me, nudging my arm, but even he couldn't fill the quiet. The days blurred. I stopped cooking proper meals, living on instant noodles I ate straight from the pot, my fingers slick with broth. Work emails piled up, unanswered. My sketchpad stayed closed. I couldn't draw, couldn't think. The drink bottle got lighter, the coffee pot heavier. One night, I found a cutting board in the sink, Aiden's handwriting on it in chalk marker. "You'll feel it when I let you go." Not yet. I scrubbed it until my hands were raw, but the words stayed in my head, looping like a song I couldn't shake. I tried to piece together what had happened. The kiss, the nights, the car wash. How had I let it go so far? I'd told myself it was just a spark, a moment, but it had burned everything down. Nick's face when he saw the text, Aiden's apology as he left. They haunted me, two sides of the same mistake. I wanted to call Nick, to beg him to come back, but what would I say? That I was sorry? That I didn't mean to break us? The truth was uglier. I'd meant it, every second with Aiden, until it cost me everything. By Friday, I was a mess, pacing the house in yesterday's clothes. I found Aiden's t-shirt in the laundry, the one with the ripped collar, and held it to my face, inhaling the faint smell of his soap, his skin. It was pathetic, but I didn't care. I folded it, tucked it into a drawer, and closed it like a coffin. The house was too big, too empty, and I was drowning in it. I scrolled my phone, avoiding Nick's last text, and ended up on Aiden's contact. No new messages. Just that Arizona text. I typed, "Did you mean it?" but deleted it before I could hit send. Instead, I opened the photo he'd sent, my feet on the stairs mid-step, like I was already running. He'd seen me, just like he said, but seeing wasn't enough. He was gone, Nick was gone, and I was left with the wreckage, sipping drink-laced coffee, wondering how I'd let myself believe a spark could be anything but fire. 2 months later, the divorce papers arrived. They came in a plain manila envelope, delivered by a courier who didn't make eye contact. Nick didn't call, didn't text. Just let his lawyer do the talking. I signed them at the kitchen table, my hand steady, the pen scratching louder than it should have. I'd tried to reach him once, a week after he left, my voice shaking as I left a voicemail. "Can we talk? Please." He called back, but it wasn't him, not really. "I wasn't perfect, Ellen," he said, his voice cold, like he was reading from a script. But you chose to be worse. Quietly. The line went dead, and so did something in me. The apartment was mine now, a technicality in the settlement. Miso slept on the windowsill, his tail flicking at the glass, chasing shadows of birds he'd never catch. The place felt like a museum of my mistakes. Nick's coffee mug still in the cabinet. Aiden's chalkboard note long erased but burned into my memory. I didn't hear from Aiden, not a word since his Arizona text. I stopped checking my phone, stopped hoping. The silence was its own kind of answer. I went back to work, forcing myself through client revisions, sketching logos that felt lifeless. The drink bottle stayed in the cupboard, untouched. I'd traded it for tea. But late at night when the city hummed outside, I'd sit on the couch, Miso purring beside me, and wonder how I'd let it all slip away. Not just Nick, not just Aiden, but me, who I was before I started pretending. One evening, scrolling mindlessly, I stumbled across Aiden on TikTok. He was in a motel room, neon light bleeding through the blinds, strumming his guitar. The caption read, "Songs about what never was." His voice was raw, the chords heavy, and I recognized the melody from those late-night headphone sessions. He looked different. Thinner, maybe, his eyes carrying a weight I hadn't seen before. I watched the video 3 times, my thumb hovering over the like button, but I didn't press it. I didn't cry because I'd lost him, or Nick, or even the life I'd had. I cried because I'd given it all away, chasing a feeling, a spark, that was never mine to keep. I closed the app, set my phone face down, and walked to the window. The city stretched out below, all lights and noise, moving on without me. Miso nudged my leg, and I picked him up, his warmth grounding me. I wasn't okay, not yet, but I was here in this apartment, with this cat, with these broken pieces. Aiden had seen me, but he was wrong about one thing. I wasn't running anymore. I was standing still, finally facing the truth. I'd burned my life down for an illusion, and now I had to build something real from the ashes.